I've seen a lot. Amid the celebrity allure of entrepreneurship, many exceptional entrepreneurs remain shadowed. Here, I team up with these hidden talents to unveil their challenges and successes. Dive in with me to unearth entrepreneurial gems, learn from our experiences, and get educated. For all of you listeners, this is Rebecca Wolfe, and she and her sister Mandy founded, created, invented Mandy Salads, which is a phenomenal restaurant concept. Obviously, it's salad based, but we're going to be talking about their story and Rebecca's story specifically about entrepreneurship and the creation of their business. And I mean, it is your restaurants are unbelievable. I love what you guys do with the concept of the inside. Um, and ladies and gentlemen, I was saying at the beginning before we got online and recorded, pressed record, I was a little bit nervous, Rebecca, for this conversation. Not because I'm nervous to talk to you, because we've known each other for a few years, and I just think the world of you, and I love what you guys have done. But I specifically, like, where my nervousness falls in, because I never get nervous about doing a podcast or having a conversation, but I felt like a little bit nervousness, and it was a little bit foreign. I'm not gonna lie. It's like, what is this? But it was the intention and of being able to make sure that I draw out everything that you have to offer, especially to women in business, and what you guys are like. I think you guys are doing awesome, and I'm so proud of you. And
Thank
proud is
you.
probably sounds condescending, but I'm really,
No,
it's just amazing. So
thanks so
so
much,
welcome to the
Dwayne.
show, and I'm going to let you explain your story because it's really cool, and it's so entrepreneurial. And so welcome to the show, and I'm looking forward to this time we're going to spend together.
Thank you. And a huge congrats to you. I know everything you touch turns to gold, but everything that I've heard on this podcast has been extremely inspiring and so authentic, and everything that you represent. And I'm happy that you're lending your voice to the world, because I always love hearing you share, and the way that you interview people has been a lot for me to listen to. So
Well,
thank you for having me. I'm honored.
look, that's very kind of you, but really, like, the success of this podcast is exactly what we have in front of me right now, is people like you who share their stories and that help inspire people to either start or continue or to get to the next level in their lives, whether it's business, personal relationships. Like, we have all these conversations, not just a business podcast, of course, but it's you guys, it's you, the guest, that is really the secret sauce to this podcast. And so, again, I'm super grateful that you're here, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation. So why don't we, like, kind of, your mother with children, and why don't you share with the audience kind of where you were and how you guys got started, and what that looked like. I know the story, but I feel like you're, most of the time I do this intro, but I really think that you're going to do it way better justice than I am.
Sure, just broad lines, like
Yeah,
where I'm at.
for sure.
What? Yeah. So my sister and I started a little salad bar in back of my then boyfriend's clothing shop 20 years ago. We celebrated 20 years last year, which is crazy. It makes me feel old. Um, and we've expanded. We have 8 locations in Montreal. We ventured into the big city, into Toronto, a few years ago. We now have 6 locations there, 3 of which are ghost kitchens, 3 are dining rooms. But Toronto's been incredibly warm and welcoming, and we don't know why we didn't do this a million years ago. Mandy has 3 little kids. I have 3 little kids. It's um, it's kind of a rat race every single day, but I still love what I do. I wake up every morning and feel blessed and grateful that I get to go to work and not really call it work, but it's a passion. It's been a labor of love since the minute that we started, and I just I feel very thankful.
So I remember when we first met, and you were telling me the story of how you guys started, and you had, when you had said to me, um, and I think at that time you probably had, well, you hadn't had the Toronto restaurants. You were just starting to look, I think, at expanding in Toronto. I think we had a conversation about that, but you'd said, yeah, we started at this little salad restaurant concept in the back of my boyfriend's clothing store, and I'm like, who starts a restaurant in a clothing store? so, so if you don't mind, just kind of expanding a little bit on that, like on the thought of it, and hey, where the concept came for salads, and why not burgers and fries or whatever. But I mean, obviously, you guys are really healthy, people, um, but just that whole concept of starting in, like,
Yeah.
nobody thinks of that. Like, I've never heard of that. And it's like,
It's crazy because today retail is so much involved with food. There's almost every big retailer you go today now has a coffee shop inside or has some sort of food offering, and it makes a lot of sense. But yeah, as you said at the time, it wasn't really going on. Um, I I studied psychology. I minored in religion. I really had no idea what I was doing in my undergrad. And post undergrad, I went to do a program at Parsons in New York, which was fine arts. I thought I maybe wanted to be a painter. I wasn't sure. And in the base of my dorm in Union Square in New York City, there was create your own salad concept. And I'd never eaten salads like that before. And my friends and I would go there every single day and we would make our own salads. And it was something that I fell in love with. And upon returning to Montreal, there was nothing like it in the city. I couldn't eat like that. And my now husband, then boyfriend, had a little clothing shop in a bougie area of Montreal called Westmount. And he had probably around 300 square feet in the back of his store that was used as a closet. And he wanted to do coffee and Italian inspired paninis and stuff. It was Italian made knitwear for women that he was selling. And I convinced him that this whole idea of eating salads as meals would take off within the demographic in Westmount. And that my sister Mandy was an incredible chef. She was doing just small little catering jobs for families at the time. And I convinced him that Mandy would come make a menu with me and I would outfit it like with IKEA stuff, and we wouldn't have to pay rent, but we would bring people in through these delicious salads and we would help his sales as well. And he agreed. And that's where it was born. We literally had an IKEA fridge. We had a cash register from, Bureau en Gros. We had a 3-foot counter, and Mandy and I every morning would go to Costco, would go to the grocery store, and we would buy fresh ingredients. And we created a little mini menu where people could make their own salads. And it was just through word of mouth. We weren't allowed to have signage outside because of zoning laws in the area, and the word of mouth spiraled, and that's sort of the beginning of how it happened. I think also what contributed to its popularity was that it was a secret and it was in the back of a store. You had to sort of know about it. And we were really catering to an upscale clientele. We would bring salads out to, fancy moms in their SUVs that were double parked outside that couldn't find parking. We would say yes to any strange request that people wanted. We go out the back door to go down the street to a little store to buy an ingredient if we didn't have it on the menu. We really were just, there was a say yes mentality from the beginning. And that really, I think, resonated with the market that we were catering to.
okay, so I have so many questions there because I mean, you defy. So when at the beginning you said, yeah, there's a lot of retailers have, some type of offering for food, but those are pretty big retailers. Like, those are retailers that have high volume traffic, and they're it's an additive to the business, and it's and it's like, and I kind of get the concept of the espresso coffee and some maybe panini or whatever, but it's like to go to a full salad and then have, you basically voided every marketing kind of concept. Well, no signage, no this, no that, and this is 20 years ago, so this is largely not before the internet, but it's certainly before, you're at the very beginning of probably cell phones, or at least as we know them now.
I think we were BBMing. It was like Blackberries at the
Right,
time, if I can
exactly.
remember correctly. Yeah.
Yeah, so you look at all this kind of stuff and you go, how did you, a where did, I guess maybe start in the very beginning, which is, where did the courage, or where did the inspiration come? Because you're starting a business, and you'd mentioned, like, hey, we're going to be able to, bring traffic to your clothing store, to your now husband. A, did that work? And B, I know the restaurant worked, we know that, but did that help him? And where was the mindset, where was the thought, or the vision when you first started it? Where did you want it to be? Um, I'm curious on that because so many people, and the reason why I asked that question is that so many people who are, so you're 20 years ago, so you're pre your kids for sure. You're just coming out of university, I think, at the time.
I was 20.
Yeah, you're
Yeah.
20. So you're like, so at 20, it's like, hey, we're going to do this thing. Is it a, was your thought it's going to be a part time thing, or we're just going to do it and see how it goes? Or what was your risk tolerance? And you didn't come from business. You graduated from psychology and I think religion, you said. So, I'm really interested because there's so many people who want to start a business, but something gets in the way, whether it's their fear, whether it's the risk, whether it's their certainty, all that kind of stuff. So where did it all happen for you?
It's interesting. People always I have this conversation all the time. Is it right to start with an end goal in mind, or is it right to just do what you love? And the truth is, in our story, is that we were just doing what we love. That's the way that Mandy and I wanted to eat. We were obsessed with the food that we were making people, and I think that we had such strong conviction in the product that we were selling that we were firm believers that other people were gonna take to it, and we were creating exactly the way that we wanted to eat. And I'd also remember just come from New York where it was crazy. Like their lineups for these salad concepts were out of control, and it was sort of day one. Once people started coming in, there were specific clients that would come in 5 days a week to eat the exact same thing because what we were serving didn't exist. And I think it's a sort of a confluence of so many different circumstances, but I think that it wasn't luck, but I think because there was nobody doing it at the time, we became the leaders in that segment. And as we all know, health food is, it's a huge part of the way that we eat today. And I think that the fact that we were the first ones in Montreal to do it really leveraged and gave us a head start in order to be where we are today. But no, I had no idea we wanted to do this as a career. I had no idea really what I wanted to do. And it was really with the reception that we were getting from people and how much they loved it that was giving us the encouragement to keep going and to keep pushing forward. And I think it was the mailman that came in about a year after we opened, and he said, "You guys are the busiest lunch place in Westmount." Because Manny and I would just be behind that counter doing dishes and chopping lettuce all day. Like we didn't even realize what was going on, but there was this strange, almost cult-like following that was developing around these salads. And we still couldn't pay rent. I mean, it was a tiny little counter, and I think that's kind of what propelled us. Also, we're always grateful to Vince for allowing us not to pay rent because it was hard and margins were difficult at the time. Healthy food is very expensive, and yeah, we were just doing what we loved at the very beginning, and only once we opened up our first storefront did it become a viable plan for potentially being a career for the two of us. And to answer your question for Vince, it was tremendously helpful. We were bringing in, so many women into his store every single day, so much so that our second location, he opened up a store in a French neighborhood in Montreal with the vision to have a salad bar in there. So we did the build out with him because he knew that there was such, yeah, there was tremendous amount of volume that would come to him based on people because people don't buy $100 shirt every day, but they come have lunch every day. So
Hmm,
there was a lot of volume for him, and it was really mutually beneficial for sure.
that's so cool. So cool. So before we go on to the first full location after you leave the clothing store, I'm curious. As you were talking about earlier, being in New York and eating this food, healthy food in New York, and this concept that was there that you love so much. When you were going to that, was there a piece where you went, "Wow, this would be great business in Montreal. Like somebody should do this," or
Oh, I remember the conversation where I was standing. I have a photographic memory, and I remember saying to my roommate that this is something that would kill in Montreal. And yeah, I had it in my brain. It was coming home. I knew that I wanted to do it, and the fact that Vince had the space, it's sort of what birthed the whole thing to happen. But I knew when I was there that it was something that I would love to bring. My father always fostered a serious entrepreneurial spirit in all of us. We're four kids, and I've always tried to think outside the box. I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew that I didn't want to pursue anything in psychology, and I thought probably that being a business person would be somewhere um, in the stars for me, and that was an idea that I believed so firmly in when I was in New York.
Do you mind just quickly going back and sharing about your dad and the impression and impact that he led you to in regards to like entrepreneurialism?
Sure. So he was a self-made businessman. He brought in huge clothing lines like Ralph Lauren and Calvin Klein, Yves Saint Laurent to Canada. He licensed all of that. So we grew up in the fashion industry, so to say, and he always encouraged us to have different kinds of ideas to approach creativity with passion. And he never came down on us for any idea we had, no matter how strange or out of the box it was. He was always really, really encouraging of that. And I remember even when we asked him, the whole thing cost $7,000 when we opened up. We had to go to IKEA. I got some wallpaper. I wanted it to be cute in there. So he gave us the $7,000. And he was a very successful businessman, but he was never embarrassed that his two daughters who had graduated from McGill were standing behind like a lemonade stand serving salads. Like he believed in us. And he unfortunately passed away before we opened up our first storefront. But he was so proud. And even we'd come in, there'd be lineups in the salad bar, and he thought it was great. And he never judged us on any career choice that we had. And there was never pressure around being a professional. He really encouraged just free thinking and creativity. So for sure it impacted me.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. I mean, sorry to hear about the loss and him passing away. I know it was years ago, but still, it's having somebody to support you and believe in you is so important, and
So
that's a
important.
beautiful story. And if and I would just say, like, if you can't find that in your own family, and I'm not obviously speaking to you, I'm speaking to the listeners. There are people to go find out there that will support you, whether they're from a mentor, and we talk about mentorship all the time and coaching, and it's really really critical to make sure that you have that source of someone who will believe in you, who will help you, guide you, you know, help you think through some of your problems, which I'm sure your dad did.
Oh, it's
Yeah,
everything. Yeah, I couldn't agree with you
that's
more.
awesome. Um, so talk to me. Okay, so you guys come up with this concept. You're selling salads. Your startup costs are 7 grand, like, which is unbelievable. I mean, it's so entrepreneurial, Rebecca. How do you, when you look back on it, do you just, at what level does it blow your mind that you're like, how did this even happen?
Yeah, it blows my mind. And I also blows my mind. I think back about myself at that age and what was my why every day. We were literally cooking chicken in our apartments every night, reducing salad vinaigrettes, smelling our cars with vinegar every day, and schlepping all the food across town, sharing a car. And just why were we doing it? And why did we keep doing it? And I think when you have a small pocket of people that are really resonating with something that you're doing from the heart, it gives you incredible encouragement and confidence to keep doing it. So even though the volume wasn't that big, the people that were interested in what we were providing were obsessed with it and were coming all the time. And yeah, because sometimes you're like, is it a pipe dream? Am I just, am I focused and in love with this concept that I'm doing? As an entrepreneur, you always ask yourself that, or do I really have something here? Is this something that could work? And you don't know. You don't know if it's all in your head but I think a true indicator is to just find a small group of people that are actually using and interacting with whatever the service or product is that you're providing and loving it.
You've used the word obsessed twice now since we started this conversation. Earlier, you used it in the context of Mandy and I were obsessed with the food that we were making for people or providing, or exact. But you used the word obsessed because I wrote it down. And I mean that is interesting, and I put that in that bucket of like obsessed with the product that you're providing, whether it's Mandy salads, whether it's any other service that you're providing, whether it be in the restaurant business, the landscape business, it could be the tech business, whatever. Um, how important, along the way, like were there some points and times, because I think you just asked a really critical question, or made a critical point, which was, along the way you had to say, like, is this just my obsession, or do we have something here? And was there a point in time where you were like, okay, we should shut this down? Like, well, let's, you know,
All the time.
yeah. So
Bank accounts, whenever the bank accounts were in the red, which was often, all the time, checks bouncing, couldn't get suppliers, just having to do everything ourselves and always scratching our heads and just wondering. And how many people would come in and say, you should just have some, sandwiches on the menu, and we'd say, "No, this is we make salads and we do salads really well." But yeah, so many people second guessing us. I'll never forget there was an elementary school girl's mom who came into the salad bar in the back of the clothing store, and she looked at me and she kind of insinuated, like, in not such a nice way, like, "Is this really what you're doing with your life?" And I remember just wanting to cry and welling up with tears and just feeling like, what is it about what we're doing that we love so much that we're continuing this? Because we could have just dropped off so many times, but we kept on because I think we really had uh, we were very committed to what we were making and believed in it so much.
Can you share a little bit about some of the emotional side on that, and also to maybe talk a little bit about the pressure? And I'm not I'm not a woman, obviously, so I don't know like the I have no obviously. I mean, I'm married, and well, I've been married twice, um, but I really don't know what it's like to feel inside that pressure, a to succeed in the world of business from a female standpoint, but also that pressure too is you know moving into as and I don't know how long did it take you to really start to to the point where you were making money and could grow. How many years was it?
We were in there for 8 years.
8 years. Ju- One location, 8 years in the back of the clothing store before you opened
Yeah,
your. That's a
yeah.
long day.
Sorry, I shouldn't say that. We opened up a second location also in a clothing
Yeah,
store in the French part of town, but we didn't have a storefront.
right.
So we didn't have a storefront for 8 years. We were making salads in back of the store, doing all the dishes ourselves and everything for 8 years in the back of the store, yeah.
Right. So that's a long time. So now you're 28 years old. The pressure of, making family, the pressure of, like you say, like this lady who's like, is this really what you're doing with your life? There gets to be a point where after 8 years, you go, holy geez, like, is this really going to make it? Are we doing, the right thing? I'm curious if you could just lend some perspective from a feminine standpoint on that and the pressure.
Yeah, I think there's obviously there's time pressure. I got married at 26, and there's I think as a woman going into business, there's a different level of of speed and time in which you need to sort of create whatever that path you want for yourself. And certainly the idea of having kids wasn't on the table because we both wanted to fulfill our careers. And there's actually I can share so many different funny and interesting and weird parts of having children throughout the way. Um, but yeah, there's a lot of pressure to make decisions about where you're at in your life. Certainly in your 20s, I find, because that's generally when women at my time were having kids. So there was certainly a pressure around that. Like, is this what I really want to do, or do I want to sort of focus on having more of a family right now? And that definitely keeps you up at night. And I can share now or later that that's I think everything falls into place as it should, and children have never impeded our success. If anything, they've enhanced the way that we've grown as humans and as business people. And women ask us that all the time, like, how did you make a decision in terms of career path? And there was no question that we wanted to have kids. We're from a family of four ourselves, and it was always going to be on the table. We just we weren't focused on it in our 20s. So I think that that comes, which is different than men that I speak to, where there's no time pressure, and it certainly, on a conscious or subconscious level, that affects decision making as you're growing, for sure, for sure.
I think now is a great time to share any stories that you have about the process of having children, because we'll always get back to the business side of things,
Yeah,
but I think the power
yeah,
in that. I kind of heard this, and I've shared this concept on the podcast before, but it's so many times we think in either or. I either need to be this, or I need to do that. Like, I either need to have kids or I need to have a career. But you and your sister have both, like, and I recently saw you in Toronto at a convention where you and your sister were speaking, and it was just like you guys were so handled. You got people, which I thought was awesome. Like, because I know you got 3 kids, right? Right. Yeah. And so, I know that you're managing all this stuff. So I think like this would be a great time, since we're on the topic, to, there's no sense in going back to it when we got it right here. we can fast forward. We'll get back to the opening of this restaurant. When did you start to have kids, and where did that start to really start to you feel that okay, now is either the time or there will be no time, but now is when we got to do it, and we'll figure it out? Or what was this? What was the thinking behind it?
So Mandy and I both got pregnant at the same time, 3 weeks apart actually, when we were signing our first biggest lease in downtown Montreal on Crescent Street, which is still one of our most successful locations. And it was sort of the big leagues, and it was really scary. And I remember the landlord said that he would hold off um, on the lease for us because we were both pregnant, and he extended it 10 months for us, which was really cool when we think back about it now. And the interesting part of having babies and then opening up our biggest location, and we literally took maybe a week off. We wanted to be right back in the restaurant, and we were so excited about the opening. Is that we at this point we had 3 locations, and it was because of having to be at home with the babies and having now locations that were more than just Mandy and I. Um, we decided to hire people and trust in people and not be there all the time. And I think that was the biggest blessing in terms of our growth trajectory, is that if we're micromanaging everything and we're trying to be everywhere all the time, there was no way that we were going to grow. So having kids was actually a huge blessing in disguise in terms of trusting our team and building a team around us that could do just what we were doing, and that gave us so much confidence. So that was a first big eye opener, and a great part of having kids, I would say. And another part of it at the beginning, we didn't grow up with help in our home. And I remember Mandy standing at this was in back of one of the salad bars with her first baby. She had her baby in a baby carrier, and we would work the cash, and her baby projectile like milk threw up on a client. And I'll never forget saying to her, like, it's over. You need a nanny. You are getting a nanny. And this is how, like, this is unsustainable. So from the very beginning, so she was the first one to hire someone to help her at home, even a couple times a week. And when I had my first child, I did the same. And I think that there's such a stigma around talking about the help that you need. And I'm not just saying that as a woman. I think if you want to have a family and you want to have a business, it takes an army, and it takes a lot of support. And it's something that we talk about a lot, especially with women, is how important it is to share in that, if you can, to have, whether it's a supportive partner, whether it's supportive grandparents, you need to lean on people in order to help you when you have little kids at home. Otherwise, it's an impossibility. I mean, we all know as parents, whether it's fatigue, just pure childcare, to be there at the beginning. And to be a better parent, you need a support system around you. So we very early on decided that we were going to lean on people. We incredible husbands, really helpful grandparents. We had part-time help at home at the beginning, and that definitely made a huge impact.
I did not know that you guys got pregnant 3 weeks apart. That is insane. That's a huge decision to now all of a sudden go, okay, we're going to hire nannies. This is what we're going to do. And, and probably came with some judgment from others along the way. How do you handle that? How do you deal with it? How do you deal with the people who are, well, who have the mindset of, well, I either need to be a mom or I need to, to to be a business person, and to take a week off. That is not uncommon in business owners, especially like female business owners, right? When you have a child and you've got a business, you have to figure out how to balance it. What would you say to people that would struggle with that as a concept?
I would say that that's probably the hardest part. I still today never feel like I'm doing a good enough job at home, and I'm never doing a good enough job at work because I'm pulled in so many different directions. Um, but I would say that, even I find even in the last 10 years, there's been so much progress in terms of the perception of women who want to be at work and who don't want to be home full time. And I think, thankfully that's it's slowly becoming, a normalcy. So it's not so much of a conversation anymore. There is sometimes for older generations in our community, that do pass judgment about the amount of time that I'm not spending with my kids, for example. And I think on the other end of it would be from what's the work perspective. But being a female run business, I think has added so much reassurance to the women that are on our team that we really do value work life balance. And we're super open and cool and really put emphasis on spending the time that you need to take care of what you need to at home. And that's something maybe that comes with just being women, but I think that that should be a part of every growing company. And I don't know if it's just by osmosis or what it is, but I would say our head office is probably 80% women, and a lot of people do have kids at home and small kids at home, and it's something that Mandy and I think is of utmost importance, and there's never judgment around that from a work perspective.
You can do it all. Like there is. I have a couple questions here. One is the pressure that you put. You had said at the very beginning the pressure that you feel that you could do more as a parent and could do more as a business person. Is that is that I guess there's a part of me would ask, is that really true? Or, is that just self-imposed pressure because you want to
Oh,
grow
for sure.
grow the business and
It's
you
self-imposed.
yeah, and would that exist regardless you whatever you were doing? I mean, sometimes I think that, even if you're a stay-at-home mom, you still feel like, oh, I'm not doing enough, or the kids are taking too much of my time, or you have all these thoughts that in the grand scheme of things, when you look back at, you know, 20 years in reverse, so when you're 60 and you're looking back at when you were 40, it's like, oh, you know what, it all worked out, it was all a blessing, it was all meant to be, just like you are now looking back, 15, 10, 15, 20 years back, you kind of go like, oh man, like you had said earlier, it's like we got, getting pregnant was the best thing because we had to rely on people inside the business, and most entrepreneurs don't learn that lesson until so late in the game that sometimes they can't even change the way they do things, and they have to have that control, or they have to have that certainty about their business. What a gift that is.
Oh, for sure.
And I don't
Yeah.
know if there's an embedded question in there, or
No, it's always it's a matter of time. I always look at life as like we have this tiny little drop of time in the course of the universe. So I always get stressed about time management and mostly obviously for to not be with my kids. But I think also people stress that, you're up against competition where you're dealing with men that are putting in however many hours a week to get to their goal, and you're not because you can't, right? Or vice versa. It's not about men or women today. I mean, there's stay-at-home dads and so on and so forth. But I think that for me, it's always a question of that, like what am I doing with my time, and how am I spending my time productively? And for me, the most fulfilling is obviously being with my kids. But there's always moments where you feel like you're not contributing enough to the business if you're not putting in that much time on that end also. So it's a constant struggle, and again, I think it's about building a really incredible team around you, which we've been so fortunate to be able to do. At the beginning, that wasn't the case. We couldn't afford to do that. But once the company grew to a certain size, we obviously have amazing support at work, so that we're not there grinding as hard as we were at the beginning, obviously, and that does lend itself to more time with the family.
when my son was born, and I was, my marriage was already like kind of on the precipice, when we kind of had we were that couple that was like, you know what, we'll have a baby and that'll make everything all right. So
It's always the perfect
yeah,
band-aid.
100%. And so I remember when he was born, I made a decision, because I'm obviously going to be a single dad, and you know my 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 thinking at the time, and this is like 22 years ago, um, was, or would be 21 actually now because he's 22. And my thinking was, do I, do I want to be the richest man in the grave, or do I want to be the best father that I could possibly be and still do kind of business? But it was really an either or. Do I want to be the richest man, or do I want to be, not the richest man, obviously, but that was the label I put on it. And then, or do I want to be a good father? And I sold 60% of the business I had at the time in order for me to be able to, be a dad, to be like taking 50% of the time. And, I was in the restaurant business back at that time. And and I had a couple other businesses, but I was in the restaurant business, and I used to take him in his, in his carry thing, and walk in and set him down on the baker's table, and the girls would come and grab him, and I mean, it was the best thing. Like, I would take him to work with me, and it was the most amazing time. Now I do
No regrets.
absolutely no regrets. I do think that I also, though, could have shifted. That was when I reflect back, 20 plus years, I could have had a better thinking of this end, which where you guys, I think, did a really, intelligent thing, which is, hey, let's hire some people, help us out. And I probably pulled back a bit where I don't think I needed to. So I didn't really think this end versus I was thinking either or. So there's no regrets, of course, but there was a different way to think that I've learned now versus back then. And so, yeah, I don't. I'm just sharing that for the audience. Whatever.
No, for sure.
The other question I have and is, what advice would you give to women who are, either thinking about owning a business, but they're kind of in that age where they're like, well, I want to have kids, or I want to have a family, or they already have a family or a young family. What advice would you give them? What would be the thing that, either you and or your sister, and I'll just borrow on your sister because you're two different people looking at things two different ways, and you know her so well, obviously. What would be the different advices that you guys would give in regards to that? Because I think it's really critical for women.
I think we would both say that you just have to do it and that you can't pick one or the other, and that you can absolutely have a beautiful career and you can have as many kids as you want and it all works out. And if anything, I think I could speak for both of us when I say that it's been probably our number one motivator to not only provide a life for our families, but also to provide an example for our kids that as women we can do it also, and we both have daughters, and it's been a really important message, I think, whenever we have sort of wanted to throw in the towel, that as women can do this and you don't have to go crazy, and you just have to have a really loving, supportive team to fall on. And that doesn't even necessarily mean to be paid. As I was mentioning, whether it's friends or family or people to help you. My husband's extremely supportive, and you can't do it alone. That's for sure. It's not easy, but I think that it's extremely rewarding, and it's definitely possible.
Sorry, I was just thinking as you were talking, and as you were articulating that, it was so beautiful. The other question that I really actually have too, that's really I think is important, is one thing I admire about you is that you have maintained your femininity through this entire process of becoming a strong businesswoman. Um, and I wonder if is that purposeful? Is that something that you've had to work at? Because when I say femininity, I think the feminine force, the feminine energy, is the most powerful.
Yeah, I remember your whole
It's the most powerful energy on earth, as far as I'm concerned. I'm just curious, was there a conscious awareness about that, or
why, because when women go into business, they can become
well, yeah, I mean,
more
yeah.
masculine energy.
Well, yeah,
No,
they can.
no, no,
They
no.
they
I know what
feel
you
like they
mean.
have to play that masculine game, right? Okay. It's like, look, if I'm going to play the sport of soccer, or if I'm going to play the sport of football, there's certain rules, there's certain things, there's certain ways you do it, there's certain rules you follow because that's the game. And people misperceive, I think, that business has certain rules when it doesn't. It can be done so many different ways. It can be created in so many different fashions or forms, and there's no one way to execute this game or play this game. And I think that you guys have chosen, or specifically you, because I know you obviously more, but you've elected to play the game in such a feminine, courageous path. I'm just curious if there was any conscious effort towards that, or if it was just like how you maintain that part of you.
I think that it's always just been organic in the way that we lead, just because we're women, and everything comes with a lot of heart. And I think at the very beginning, when we did have to start making some pretty big decisions in regards to other human beings that we work with, we always would approach it from a human heart standpoint and not from a transactional standpoint. And I think that's what's differentiated the way that we've led and grown the company is that, um, yeah, the end result is usually about harmony versus bottom line. And I think that knowingly, or I think maybe unknowingly and now knowingly, it's really served us. So in our case, it's only been positive that there's a strong female energy that leads the company. I think it's really helped in terms of not only engaging and retaining our staff and culture, but the way that people receive the end product. Also, I think there's a feminine energy there. Also,
Uh,
it's been great
yeah,
for
there
us.
absolutely is, and that you would say so that was unconscious then, it just came
Yeah,
naturally.
that's just who we are. So we would always, yeah, we never really thought about it, and it was more other people that would come and sort of scratch their heads at decisions that we were making along the way, and then we sort of realized that it is a little bit different than maybe it being a company run by men, where I feel like the trajectory would have been a little bit different and decisions would have been taken differently. Also,
What do you think some of those would be? And you said some people have come along. By that, do you mean like
internally
coaches
and
or
externally,
mentors or people you've hired,
everything.
consultants?
Yeah, yeah. Um, Specifically with like a lot of HR decisions. I mean, that's for sure. Um, we had somebody that came into the company, I'll never forget, and he was there. He was a pretty high up position. He was within operations, and he was standing at the cash one day, and he had a stopwatch, and he didn't like how long the transactions were taking at the caches and the lines. And so his whole plan was to like slash like POS interactions by a big amount versus having an interaction with the guest that was there and making them feel good. And Mandy and I have always, we built the business on making people feel good, whether it was our staff or our guests. And right away, we knew that person wasn't for the company because it wasn't just about getting in and out and we weren't a machine. It's like the whole business model operates on heart. So I don't know if that's too of like a broad out there example, but
No,
and I would say mostly people decisions at the end of the day when it comes to, I don't like using the word money, but money versus humans, and it's always about the humans. So
I think actually that's a really good example of holding your space or your vision for what it is that you want to happen with the relationship with the customer, right? The minute you bring out a stopwatch, I mean, that has a ripple effect. You start to implement policies inside your business, and that can ripple affect, the customer service experience. And that's the difference between, quick service restaurant business or a high end, which you are is, a higher end brand for lunch and dinner offerings, right? It's
yeah,
like,
yeah,
and there's probably significant margin differences that you have to really kind of focus on, but ultimately at the beginning it's, hey, this is what we want for the customer experience. So
absolutely. And we start losing sight of those little nuances. It's the beginning of the end. So yeah, we really stick to a lot of the values that matter to Mandy and I, and one of which is really just, yeah, love and connection. So it starts with the staff and it goes to the guest for sure.
what would you say have been the biggest struggles, and whether that's in the past or more recent, but with, you know trying to continue and create as you grow your business to maintain that love connection with the customer, with training staff and being able to execute and building your team and your exec team and the management team underneath that? Like, where's the deep struggles been?
Yeah, I mean the hardest part is in it's I hate saying the whole company value thing is so cliche, but really translating that and transcending all those values down to, the dishwasher. It's like how do you make that live in the restaurants? And it's obviously a lot of trust, it's a lot of training, it's a lot of quality of hiring, but it's about company communication really. And as we grow, I have so much more compassion for bigger companies now because it's a very very hard thing to do. But it's really important to Maddie and I, and it's at the core of everything that we want to achieve is making sure that those values do live in real life and aren't just written on a blackboard and, in our head office. So I would say that's a huge challenge. And something that scares me is that we've built this business on detail from everything from, whether it's the music, the look and feel of the restaurants, the um, product knowledge on behalf of our staff, the energy and attitude of our staff. And when those details get lost, it's a very scary thing. So yeah, sometimes you have to focus on the little stuff in order for the big stuff to work. So I think that's, for me, that's the scariest thing as we grow, that we lose all that magic in the detail.
Yeah. So how do you maintain that? Like, and how are you dealing with those obstacles or those struggles? With making sure that the details are in, or making sure that what you said earlier, which was the ideas on a blackboard in the office. It's like or a whiteboard or what. You know, how do you, as you grow, like how are you guys translating that back into the locations? Because now you're, what are you, 15 locations between two major cities. It's a big operation now. How many staff do you have?
I think we have around, like, I think it's close to 600
Yeah.
now. Yeah. So it's a hard it's definitely the hardest part, and I think what we've learned is we don't have all of the answers, and we've been really good at bringing in people that do have more experience and expertise than we do. I think that's a really important part of being an entrepreneur also, not being scared at what other people can bring to the table that are as good as you and hopefully better than what you do, and just knowing what you do best and knowing what other people do best. So bringing in people from HR and operations that are well experienced, that come from similar industries, that have been able to implement process for us around that communication. So I can get into details about the process of it, but a lot of it comes through training, and then there's follow-up trainings, and the way the company communication happens on a weekly, if not daily basis, with district managers, et cetera, is really important. We do a lot of rallies in our locations. There's a lot of communication and feedback is one of our values in the company, and we really, I think, do stand by it. I think also we do really fun things with our staff. I know Mandy and I are very much involved in really fun company retreats that we do a couple times a year, and Christmas parties, and we spend a lot of time close with people and team building. Her and myself personally, so I think that contributes to the smaller pocket at the top that's then able to translate that down, which helps.
Yeah, that's interesting. Um, I want to speak more about this topic, but I want to just rewind a little bit and get back to a little bit of the growth. So you are 8 years in business. You've got two locations. Both are in the back of clothing stores that Vince, your now husband, owns. Um, and the second restaurant, how big is it? How many square feet? Is it similar to the
Same
same thing?
thing, teeny
Okay.
tiny. Yeah.
And you guys are washing dishes, cutting salad, like doing cutting lettuce, sorry, and I mean, I just love it. Um, and then you make this decision to jump and get your own storefront and start to take Mandy's to the next level.
Yeah, it was my husband's lease in Westmount, the original location was up, and he didn't want to renew the lease. And at that point, we were at a huge crossroads. We had never paid rent before. So we were scratching our heads and saying, is this it? Is this the goal? Is this the dream? Are we going to do this? And, Mandy and I believed in it so much. And so did Vince at the time. And he said, you guys can 100% do this. We're going to find a space right around here. You're not going to dissuade our existing clients, and they're still going to come back. And we found a little cupcake shop one block down for us that was for sale for $50,000. And so we went to my mom. My dad had passed away, and she gave us $50,000 to buy this little cupcake shop. And I remember the first day opening, we had my brother sitting on the old stairs of the other location, like telling people that we were just a block over and that we were still there. And we were so scared that nobody was going to
Oh my
come.
God, it's classic.
And I have to, it was literally day two. And again, there's no internet, there's nothing. Day two, it was lined up around the block. And what was so interesting was that it was the first time that we didn't have just women coming in that were sort of by osmosis of being clients of the women's clothing store. Now we had bus drivers and we had men. We had, I would say, like, at the beginning, I want to say half and half, but we had a lot more men that were coming in, and the demographic was so diverse and different than what we had been used to in back of the store. And it was crazy too how many people that were in and around the area that had no idea that we had been back of the store for 8 years. They had no idea. So we were brand new. It was gangbusters day one. I remember we had tears in our eyes. Like, that first week, we just couldn't believe what we had done. And that's when everything changed. And we said, this is it. We have something here. And we were able to pay our rent, and we were able to take our own money. And it was a huge game changer.
That's so cool. How, just curious, as a percentage of rent, and I don't know, I don't want to say the first day, but as a percentage, sorry, percentage of rent, I said, as a percentage of sales, like how much did your sales jump as a percent? I'm not asking for numbers, but just what percent did they jump once you kind of got into your own location and were able to, have a storefront? Probably, I'm assuming this is the first time you have a sign out front.
Yeah, we have a
Right.
sign. We're salads, we're
It's
outside. I don't know
crazy.
percentage, but it was,
What, double, triple? Like,
oh, more, more, more,
wow.
more. Yeah, yeah,
I mean, it's
yeah.
so crazy. And
It was
and
crazy.
do you think if Vince's clothing, if he wasn't, thinking of, okay, I don't want to renew this lease, that you would have done it?
I don't think I don't know. I don't know. I don't know how much longer we could have just been in the back of the store sort of rolling with it. I think it was circumstantial. That was luck, I think, of timing for sure. Yeah, no, that one gave us the wings to open up in downtown Montreal. And I should say that that's really like the company sort of grew in like a hockey stick way, where that opening in Crescent, once we had the babies right then, was 2013, no, 2015, we opened up there. And that's when the company completely changed. We opened up next to universities downtown, and everyone was like, how are you going to pay the big bucks in rent in Montreal? And you have to have sandwiches on the menu. There's no way you guys are going to be able to hold this rent with just salads. And same thing, day one, lineups. It was just, we were overwhelmed with just the love that came out of Montreal when we opened up on Crescent.
And so I'm assuming at this time, you've got a bit of a brand. You're now into, sorry, you said 2013 or 15? 15.
15.
So now like, you know, phone technologies rapidly, increased in terms of, and then marketing, social media. Were you guys doing any of that back in 2015, and how much of that carried over, and what was your strategy as you were growing, and anything in there?
We again, we didn't have a strategy. We got very lucky that the minute that Instagram started, I my brother was dating somebody that was on Instagram, and I didn't even know what it was at the time. We were on Facebook, and I just started playing around with it for work. And we were selling our salads in these clear containers. They looked like a liter. They were clear, and people would walk around with their Mandy salads with this rainbow of color in these clear containers, and everybody would ask, where they got their food from. That was a huge marketing tool for us at the beginning. It was just the product itself really sold itself. And then people started photographing these salads in these containers that also just didn't exist at the time. And it went, I mean, for the time, went viral on Instagram. But I think we realized that it was helping us so much, Instagram and other people sharing about our company and not just us sharing. That was tremendous for us at the beginning. And it would also help us to open. When we opened up on Crescent, we were already on Instagram, and I would attribute those lineups that first day to Instagram. And since then, we've never paid for social media. All of our followers have been organic, and we've grown it. I think we have, almost 90,000 followers now. And I think that the traction that we get through that's probably our most successful social media platform, is because it's organic following and not paid for. I think today, I don't know how all of the algorithms work, but I think that's been really big for us, is that people that are engaging with us are genuine and have been there through the growth.
Can you share with me a little bit about, like, the location selection, and B, um, the different, what I would say is a differentiation between like you and any competition in terms of the design of your restaurants. And I mean, they're amazing and they're very unique. And
Thank you.
I know that, and I'm not saying that because I know you, I think you're the one that does all the designing of the restaurants, but they're I mean, they're unbelievable. And I remember when my wife went in to the first time into Mandy's, she was like, "Oh my god, these things are they're
Uh,
so awesome. I mean, they're so much different than anything that you're kind of are going to come across in the industry. It's not cookie cutter. It's very,
thank
yeah,
you.
distinctive. I don't know what the word is. I'm not a fashionista, but
Well, it all goes back to we wanted people to feel a certain way when you're in the space, and I think typically health food or salad bars are sort of clinical and sterile and don't make you necessarily want to hang out. And we wanted people to come there not just for the food, but also for the vibe. And as I was mentioning, it's everything from music and lighting to staff, but decor is extremely important. And it's what I love to do best. I think if I wasn't in this, I would definitely be an interior designer. I live and breathe design. And it's so fun for me that every time we get to open a restaurant, I get to innovate and I get to create a new space again. And I love mixing and sort of testing where we can go with design. And especially what you said, because it is a little bit strange that we're a salad bar, but it's vibey in there. And I like to bring in all elements from all over the world and inspiration from travel. And today you can go online and go into someone's, living room in India and get inspired. It's so cool. And yeah, it's the biggest joy for me by far is opening the doors and being able to share a new space with people that we love creating. The last one we did, I've never been to India. It's top on my bucket list, but there's this place in Jaipur called Villa Palladio Jaipur, and I've been following them and in love with them online forever. And we interpreted a lot of the artwork, and I got to paint a lot of the artwork myself for the opening we just did in Yorkville, which was so much fun. And yeah, it's a joy to get creative with the openings.
so
It's the best.
you painted yourself?
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. Like I went in there for a couple weeks and we painted all the trees on the walls and we got to do like all of the actual painting, which is that's what I would want to be doing all day long.
So maybe I would love to talk about this too, because and I was just actually in the process of making a note about it, but and to come back to it, but let's talk about it right now because I think that so many people think that business, um, people who are either interested in getting into business or people who are in business tend to get stuck with like the business stuff, and and you know it's very not very often you get to speak to an owner of a business that is growing the way your business is growing, and you're able to pull yourself out and do the things that you want to do versus the things that you feel you have to do. And I think that's I mean, to me, I believe that's the recipe for fulfillment, right? It's there's the science of achievement and the art of fulfillment, and the science of the numbers and the business and all that kind of stuff. And if that floats your boat, awesome, do it. But if it doesn't float your boat, you can hire people to do it, and then you can fulfill yourself in the other areas of the business, which it seems like you and your sister are doing at a pretty high level. I mean, we haven't even talked about your book yet, the recipe book, which is amazing, which is in our kitchen, and my wife uses it all the time. I have no
Oh.
idea what's in the book. I know when it got delivered. I remember when you told me when you had written your book, we bought one and it came, and I flipped through it. I'm like, this stuff looks awesome. I'm really looking forward to eating some of this. And I'll be
It's just like a pretty coffee table book too. You don't even have to open
yeah,
it.
so. Um, but maybe you
Yeah,
could share some stuff there because it's so beautiful that you're able to kind of pull out for a couple of weeks and do that.
yeah, I think as we've grown with really awesome mentors, one of the most valuable pieces of advice was you can't drive the bus if you're sitting on the bus, right? So we've always known what we do best and where our shortcomings are as humans, as individuals, and as that contributes to the business. And we've been very comfortable, as I was saying, building a team around us who do what they do best. So whether it's, ops or finance or HR, things that sometimes not only that we don't necessarily enjoy spending our time doing, but that we're not as good as somebody that we can bring in to do it. And Mandy and I are really, really clear about what we do really well. And that's been the contributing factors to the success of the company from the beginning. She makes really, really good food, and I'm really good at branding and design. And if we're not focused on those two things and spending time doing things that are not contributing to the company because there's people that could do it better than us, then we're failing. So we're very clear about that, and we look at our a series of meetings, and we're really good at that now at the beginning of the week. And if any of those meetings don't contribute to those elements of Mandy and my talents, then it's not beneficial for the company, and it's not beneficial for Mandy and I. So we're very clear about the way that we spend our time and the value that we bring to the company. And we we now, I feel so blessed to say this, but we get to spend time doing what we love to do and what we're good at doing. And I think that that's a part of the success.
Love, love, love what you're just saying there. And anybody who's listening to this should rewind about 68 seconds and listen to it again, because I so often get people who'll call me and they'll either they'll ask ultimately the question surrounds itself around, hey, I'm thinking about doing this, and what's your best piece of advice? And the first words out of my mouth are always, you have got to get clear on what you want. Clarity is the most important thing. And if you don't have it, you'll end up doing something that you ultimately don't want to do. And so, do you mind just sharing? Because there's a lot of push pull in business, and no matter what size the business, there's a lot of push pull. But when you're growing a business the way you guys have, especially 2015 to 24, you've got 15 locations. That's not just a little bit of growth. So how have you guys how did you set your clarity, or how did you get clear? What was the process? What was the advice you were given? What advice or process could you give to our listeners? Because I think this is so, 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 so critical.